Welcome to our Deep Dive podcast. Today we're exploring the story, Another Home Mistake, a cautionary tale by Nice Scar Media. This gripping story delves into the tragic consequences of carelessly storing hazardous items at home. Join us.
You know when you're at home and you just feel safe?
Yeah.
Like totally at peace.
Yeah, you feel secure.
Well, today, we're going to look at a story that shows us even in places that feel really safe,
Right.
there can be hidden dangers.
Absolutely.
This is about the Gamble family from Mississippi.
Okay.
Two brothers, Ethan, he's 10, and Lucas, who's 12.
Okay.
And their house sounds like one of those, like a really picturesque kind of home, like freshly painted shutters, the smell of cinnamon, you know, everywhere. Like
family photos.
Family photos, yeah. But one little thing, one tiny oversight ends up shattering their peace.
It's amazing how those things happen.
So we're going to unpack all of that. We're going to look at the choices they made, what was going on, and the psychology behind everything that led up to this really tragic situation. Hopefully, so you listening can learn and make sure the same thing doesn't happen in your own home.
Right. It's a powerful story. And what's so fascinating is how it really gets you inside the head of Lucas, the older brother. It shows how kids are wired to explore, to push the limits. You know, their brains are still developing, especially that part called the prefrontal cortex. That's the part that helps with things like controlling impulses and really understanding what the consequences of actions might be. So while an adult might see a lost cabinet and be like, whoa, danger, a kid might just see it as a challenge, something they've got to figure out.
Right. And the story actually mentions a locked cabinet that belongs to the father.
Right.
And that immediately gets Lucas's attention.
Yeah, it's like it's calling to him.
Yeah.
That forbidden fruit.
Totally.
But it's more than just someone saying, no, don't do that.
Right.
It's the way a kid's brain works at that age. They want new things, they're curious, and they just don't have the experience to really get what might happen if they do something.
And there are all these other little details, too, like where the key was, the fact that the parents were out.
Right, running errands.
Yeah, doing errands.
All these seemingly small choices and routines.
Right.
They actually all come together to create a certain environment.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the big, obvious dangers.
Yeah.
But often it's these subtle, almost invisible things that can really make a space safer or less safe.
So Lucas finds the key. And being the older brother, he's like, I'm going to show Ethan.
Of course.
So he involves him in the whole thing.
Now you have to remember, when you're a kid, it's so important to impress people, especially your siblings. So Lucas might have wanted to seem cool, adventurous to his little brother. But sometimes wanting to impress someone can make you forget to be careful. It's not that he wanted to do anything bad. It's more about how complicated relationships are at that age.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they open the cabinet, and what's in it?
A gun.
A gun.
Oh.
And the story even talks about how sleek it is, you know?
Again, right? It's powerful.
Yeah, powerful forbidden object. And even Ethan, who's clearly a little bit scared, is intrigued by it.
This is where that idea of power fantasy comes in.
Right.
It's a big thing, especially for boys that age.
Yeah.
They see all these images of heroes with weapon strength and power connected to guns.
Yeah.
Holding a gun can make them feel like they're in one of those fantasies.
Yeah.
Like they're older, stronger, more in control. It's a powerful feeling.
Right.
And can make them forget to think clearly.
And that's unfortunately exactly what happens. The boys start praying with the gun.
Oh.
They think it's not loaded.
That's the thing. You should never, ever assume a gun is unloaded.
Right.
Until you've checked it yourself.
Right.
It's like the most basic rule of gun safety.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's the one people forget the most.
Yeah.
Sometimes with really bad results.
Yeah.
Don't ever just take someone's word for it that a gun isn't loaded, especially a kid's word.
And in this story, the gun was loaded. Lucas ends up shooting Ethan. And the story really describes it all. The sound of the gunshot.
Wow.
The blood. The absolute terror of that moment.
Yeah. It reminds you that guns aren't toys.
Yeah.
They can kill.
Right.
Even one careless moment
can
have consequences that you can't undo. This is where keeping guns safe becomes so important.
Yeah.
Unloaded, locked up, ammo stored somewhere else.
Right.
Those aren't just suggestions.
Yeah.
They could save a life.
So the story goes on to describe what happens immediately after. chaos, the paramedics showing up, the parents getting home, to a scene that no parent should ever have to see.
Can you even imagine what they were feeling? The panic, the guilt, the blame. This isn't just about a physical injury. It's about the mental and emotional trauma that everyone feels. The parents realizing that their choices led to something they never could imagine. Lucas knowing that he did this. Just heartbreaking.
The story then follows them to the hospital where Ethan's having surgery, and you see Lucas just feeling so guilty. They're all waiting for news. No one knows what's going to happen.
This is when you really start to see how trauma affects people. It's not just the physical injuries. It's the emotional and mental pain that can actually be worse in the long run. The fear, the anxiety, the possibility of PTSD, it affects everyone.
And then right in the middle of all of this, a police officer comes to talk to the family.
This is where the story changes. It goes from this immediate tragedy to a bigger discussion about gun safety in general. It's not just about the Gamble family anymore. It's about something that affects all of us.
And he talks about how these kinds of accidents happen way too often. And he even says that just locking up a gun isn't enough. You have to keep it unloaded, store the ammo separately, and make sure kids can't get to the key.
Absolutely.
And that really hits home considering what's happened.
And it's something everyone needs to hear, even if you don't have kids. If you have guns in your home, you are responsible for keeping them safe. No excuses.
Then we see what happens after the family trying to put their lives back together, trying to heal. Ethan thankfully recovers, but the scars, both physical and emotional, are always going to be there. Lucas feels so much guilt, and the parents are trying to deal with their own feelings of responsibility and failure.
This part of the story really shows how resilient people are. It shows how we can find strength and heal even after the worst things happen.
And that's exactly what the Gambles do. They start taking gun safety courses as a family. They talk about what happened, and slowly they start to rebuild their lives.
This shows us that it's so important to learn from our mistakes, no matter how much they hurt. Sometimes the hardest times in our lives teach us the most important lessons.
So we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We've seen how even small choices can have huge consequences. We've seen how dangerous it is to not store guns safely. And we've seen how important it is to talk openly, especially in families. But there's still a lot more to this story.
There's a lot more to learn. Welcome back. So we're really getting into this story about the Gamble family and what happened to them. It's important to remember that while this was something very personal for them, it reflects a much bigger issue in society. Sadly, accidental shootings involving kids happen way too often.
It is a really sobering thought, and it makes you think, what can we do to stop these kinds of tragedies from happening? The police officer in the story really focused on safe storage, but is that all it takes?
Safe storage is super important, but it's just one piece of a much bigger, more complicated problem. We need to kind of zoom out and look at the things in society that contribute to gun violence in general.
Okay, so help me understand that. What are some of those factors?
Well, one big one is how easy it is to get guns. In the U.S., for example, there are more guns than people.
Wow.
And in some places, the laws about guns aren't very strict. So it can be really easy to get a gun. Even for people who maybe shouldn't have one.
That's a pretty amazing statistic. More guns than people.
Yeah, it is. And then there's the whole cultural side of things. In some cultures, guns are seen as symbols of power, masculinity, even protection. And that can make owning a gun seem normal and less dangerous than it really is.
So it's like people become less sensitive to the real dangers.
You could say that. And the media can make that worse, especially the way violence is shown. Think about those action movies that Lucas liked so much. They often make gun violence seem heroic or exciting. That's entertaining for some people. But it can send the wrong message, especially to young people who are still figuring out how the world works.
That's interesting. It's like we get these mixed messages about guns. On one hand, we're told they're dangerous and to be super careful. But then on the other hand, they're used in movies and TV shows all the time.
It's a really good point. It's like we're both afraid of guns and fascinated by them at the same time. It's complicated.
It's a really complex issue. So given all these factors, where do we even start to try to fix it?
I think education is key.
Okay.
We need to start teaching kids about gun safety early.
Right.
Even if they don't have guns in their home. It's about making everyone aware and responsible.
Yeah.
Not just protecting kids who live in homes with guns.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture of safety around guns in general.
Exactly. And that education needs to include adults, too. We need to teach people how to be responsible gun owners. That means safe storage, knowing how to handle conflict without violence, and taking care of their mental health.
So it sounds like there isn't just one solution. It's about education, responsible ownership, and dealing with those bigger issues in society that we talked about.
Exactly. It's not an easy fix.
Right.
But we need to keep talking about it if we want to prevent tragedies like what happened to the Gambles.
And their story really shows how important communication is. If Lucas had felt comfortable talking to his parents about the gun, maybe things would have been different.
It's so important for families to talk openly and honestly, especially about tough subjects like guns. Parents need to make sure their kids feel safe, asking questions and talking about things that worry them without being judged or punished.
It's about building trust.
Yeah.
So kids feel like they can talk to their parents about anything.
Exactly. And parents need to be open and honest with their kids about the dangers of guns. Even if it's a hard conversation to have, sometimes those tough conversations are the most important ones.
So it's not just about locking up the guns. It's about making sure you can talk to your kids, too.
That's a good way to put it.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
We started with a story about a family.
Yeah.
But we've talked about so much more, like why people take risks, what causes gun violence, and how important communication is.
That's what I love about deep dives.
Right.
You start with one thing,
and
then you connect it to all these bigger ideas and issues that affect everyone. You go beyond just understanding a problem and start thinking about solutions.
And sometimes the saddest stories teach us the most important lessons.
That's true.
They can inspire us to make real changes.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about a lot of really serious stuff, but I think there's hope in the Gamble family's story, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They went through something horrible.
Right.
But they found a way to heal and become a stronger family.
Their story is amazing. It shows that even after a terrible tragedy, people can still find a way to grow and heal.
And they showed how strong people can be. They learned from something truly awful. And it's inspiring.
Yeah.
It shows that even in the darkest of times, there's always a chance for growth and healing.
The most important thing to remember is that we all have to do something.
Right.
Whether it's talking to our kids about gun safety, pushing for stricter gun laws, or just being more careful ourselves, every little thing we do can make a difference. We have the power to change things for the better.
It's a powerful message.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners will think about it long after this episode is over.
Me too.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into such an important and thought-provoking topic.
And in the next part, we'll look at some specific things that people and communities can do to address this issue. We'll talk about how to have those tough conversations, how to get involved in making change happen, and how to be a force for good in your own community.
So welcome back to the deep dive. We've been going deep on this story about the Gamble family and how one event with a gun just totally changed their lives. We've talked about storing guns safely, those big picture things in society that play a role, and how important it is to be able to talk openly about this stuff. But now I think everyone's wondering, what can we actually do about it?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Like it's just too big to even know where to begin. But even small things can make a difference. We don't have to do everything at once.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are some actual things our listeners can do right now?
If you're a parent or taking care of kids, the first thing is to talk to them about guns. Even if there aren't any guns in your house, it's so important to tell them about the dangers and what to do if they ever see one.
That's a really good point. It's not just about keeping kids safe in homes with guns. It's about making everyone understand that guns are serious. You're basically giving them information that could save their lives or someone else's.
Exactly. And these talks shouldn't be a one-time thing. Keep talking about it as they get older, because what they understand changes as they grow.
So start early, talk often, and make sure they feel like they can come to you if they have any questions or worries. That's so important.
And if you do own guns, there's no question about it. You have to store them safely, unloaded, locked up, and the ammo needs to be kept somewhere else.
And those keys. Keep them away from kids. I remember reading about this kid who found the key to a gun safe hidden in a dictionary. The kid had seen their parent get the key from there before, and, well, it was a tragedy. Kids are really good at noticing things. We have to remember that.
That's true. We can't forget how curious and clever kids can be. It's a good idea to talk to friends and family about safe storage, too. You might be surprised how many people just don't know about the risks, or haven't taken the time to do what they need to do to be safe.
It's like we need to build a safety net, not just in our own homes, but in our communities, too.
That's a great way to put it. And then there are things we can do together to push for bigger changes.
You mean like laws and changing how people think about guns as a whole?
Yeah. We can support groups that are working to stop gun violence. We can talk to our elected officials and tell them that gun safety is important to us. And of course, we can vote for people who share our views and want to make good laws about guns.
So it's about speaking up and using our votes to make things safer for everyone.
Exactly. And remember, big changes don't happen overnight. It takes time and everyone working together and being willing to have those conversations that are sometimes tough.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We started with one family story, but we've covered so much. Why people take risks, the really complicated reasons for gun violence in society, how important it is to communicate, and what we can actually do to make a difference.
That's what's so cool about really digging deep into a topic. You connect all these dots and see how things that seem separate are actually related to bigger patterns. It helps us understand the problems and think about solutions.
And sometimes the saddest stories are the ones that teach us the most. They can really inspire us to make a change.
The Gamble family story is a powerful reminder that danger can be anywhere, even in places where we feel safe. But it also shows how strong people can be, how we can grow and learn even when something terrible happens.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners today?
I think it comes down to this. We all have a role to play in making the world safer. Talking to our loved ones about gun safety, storing guns the right way, working to change things in our communities and in our laws, every little thing we do matters, even if it seems small. It all adds up. We can make a difference.
That's a really powerful message, one that I hope everyone takes to heart. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. This has been a really important conversation.
Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.